In a sleek office building in Manhattan, Jordan sat in his cubicle, staring out at the skyline. A black man, working his way up in a predominantly white corporate world. Jordan had always felt like an outsider. Despite his hard work and dedication, his contributions were rarely acknowledged. He had recently been promoted to project manager, but his colleagues still saw him as just another guy in the background. Richard, his boss, frequently overlooked him, and Emily, Richard's daughter, treated him like a colleague at best. Nothing more. Tonight, Montgomery Enterprises was hosting a lavish gala at one of New York's top venues. Jordan had been invited but felt out of place amongst the elite. The company was on the verge of a major deal, and everyone was in attendance to network and celebrate. As the evening unfolded, Jordan noticed how Emily's attention drifted toward her socialite friends and business contacts. During the evening, Jordan couldn't escape the subtle discrimination that followed him everywhere. Richard, who had treated him as an afterthought in meetings, now spoke to him as if he were invisible. "Jordan, good to see you," Richard said, his tone falsely warm. "You're handling the Jackson project, aren't you? I hope you're not too overwhelmed, given your position." Jordan forced a smile, his insides burning with frustration. The comment wasn't just about his job. It was a reminder of how little Richard thought of him. As the night dragged on, Emily caught his eye across the room, but before she could approach, she was whisked away by her colleagues. The sting of rejection was nothing new to Jordan, but tonight, it cut deeper than usual. Later that night, Jordan received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Jordan, this is Henry Montgomery. You don't know me, but I know you." Jordan froze. Henry Montgomery? The name sounded familiar but distant. Henry continued, "I'm your grandfather, and you are the rightful heir to Montgomery Enterprises. It's time you learned the truth." The shock hit him like a freight train. His mind raced. Grandfather? Heir to Montgomery Enterprises? Jordan had never known. His mother, Amara, had always kept him in the dark, trying to shield him from the truth. But now, his life was about to change forever. Jordan spent the following days in a daze, processing the revelation. He wasn't just the project manager at Montgomery Enterprises. He was the heir to the entire empire. Montgomery Enterprises was one of the largest, most influential family-run conglomerates in the country, and it had been hidden from him for years. Henry's voice still echoed in his mind. "It's time for you to take your place. Your legacy is waiting for you." Jordan felt a mix of emotions: pride, anger, confusion. He was told to return to the family estate, where everything would be explained. But there was one thing Jordan knew for sure. He wasn't going to let this power change who he was. The night Jordan arrived at the Montgomery estate, he was greeted by Henry, a tall, distinguished man in his late 60s, with sharp eyes and a commanding presence. "You've grown up well, Jordan," Henry said, his tone both kind and direct. "I've watched from afar as you navigated the world. But now, you must take your place here. I've arranged everything for you to step into the role you were born for." Jordan was overwhelmed. He was used to hard work and earning everything he had. He never expected something like this to be handed to him. But Henry's words had power. And for the first time in his life, Jordan felt a flicker of something new, not just power, but responsibility. Jordan's world shifted that night. As the heir to Montgomery Enterprises, Jordan began to see his future in a new light. But with that power came great pressure. He had always worked hard to prove his worth to the world. And now he had to prove that he was worthy of leading one of the largest business empires in the country. He returned to work the next day with a new mindset. No longer would he let Richard or anyone else undermine him. He was determined to lead Montgomery Enterprises to new heights, and he was going to start right away. Jordan's first test as the head of Montgomery Enterprises came faster than expected. Catherine, the CFO, had already begun spreading rumors about his lack of experience. She'd made it clear in meetings that Jordan's promotion wasn't earned. It was a result of his inheritance. "He's inexperienced," Catherine whispered to several board members. "We need someone with real business acumen, not someone who was handed everything." Jordan overheard the conversation from the hallway. He was used to whispers behind his back, but this was different. It wasn't just about his race, it was about the power he'd inherited. Something no one believed he deserved. He walked into the room, his mind set on proving Catherine wrong. "I didn't come here to play games," Jordan said firmly. Montgomery Enterprises needs bold decisions. If you want change, you'll get it. The room fell silent. He wasn't asking for permission, he was demanding respect. Jordan's strategy was simple but effective. Expand Montgomery Enterprises into global markets, focusing on the tech industry, and streamline operations within the company. His first major decision was a partnership with a global tech giant, something Richard had hesitated to pursue for years. When Jordan presented the idea, the board was divided. Some were supportive, but others, mostly those who had sided with Richard, were skeptical. "This is too risky," they argued. "You're stepping into territory that's uncharted." Jordan stood his ground. "Risk is part of success. We're not here to maintain the status quo. We're here to change the game." He secured the deal, and soon Montgomery Enterprises was working with international partners. The company's profits soared, and Jordan's influence grew stronger. But Richard and Catherine weren't giving up without a fight. They began to spread more doubts, questioning Jordan's decisions and ability to lead. As the business continued to thrive under Jordan's leadership, his relationship with Emily began to deteriorate. She had always been a symbol of Jordan's connection to the world he was now distancing himself from. But now, with his newfound power, Emily felt left behind. "Jordan, I don't know what's happening to you," Emily admitted one evening, her voice trembling. "You're changing. You've become someone else." Jordan felt a pang of guilt. He had always wanted to share this journey with her, but his ascent to power had come at the cost of their relationship. "I'm doing this for us, Emily," he said quietly. "I need to be this man. For me, for the company, and for you." But Emily's heart ached. She couldn't reconcile the man she once loved with the person he was becoming. And so, despite the love they shared, Emily stepped away, unsure if they could ever be the same again. As the weeks went by, the battle within Montgomery Enterprises became more intense. Richard and Catherine were no longer passive opponents. They were actively trying to sabotage Jordan's position. They worked behind the scenes, trying to convince the board to remove him, arguing that his decisions were too reckless. One day, Richard took Jordan aside. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice filled with barely contained fury. "This company is built on my blood, my legacy. You're just a boy who got lucky." Jordan remained calm. He had heard these words before. This was just another attempt to diminish him, to remind him that no matter how successful he became, he would never truly be accepted. "I'm not your boy," Jordan replied. "I'm the future of Montgomery Enterprises. You'll have to get used to it." The turning point came when Jordan made a bold decision to acquire a competitor, a tech company that had been eating into Montgomery Enterprises' market share. The move was risky, but it had the potential to double the company's revenue. Richard and Catherine saw it as a foolish gamble. "This is the kind of move that ruins businesses," Catherine warned. "You'll put everything at risk." Jordan ignored the warnings. He knew this was his chance to solidify his legacy. Sometimes the boldest moves are the ones that pay off the most. He was right. The acquisition not only strengthened Montgomery Enterprises' market position, but it also shut down any remaining doubts about his leadership abilities. But Richard and Catherine were not going down without a fight. They went to the board one last time, attempting to oust Jordan by claiming he was a liability to the company's stability. The tension in the room was palpable. For the first time, Jordan felt the weight of every decision he had made, knowing that this final battle would decide his future. As the board meeting began, Jordan stood up, his voice steady but filled with authority. "You don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with me," he said, looking at Richard and Catherine. "But I have one thing you can't deny. I've delivered results. Montgomery Enterprises is stronger than it's ever been, and I'm the one who made that happen." Richard glared at him, but he knew it was over. The board voted overwhelmingly in favor of Jordan's leadership. The power had shifted. Richard and Catherine, once the giants of Montgomery Enterprises, were now sidelined, their influence all but gone. The fallout from Jordan's victory was swift and dramatic. Richard and Catherine, now sidelined, tried to salvage whatever remained of their reputations. But their efforts were in vain. Jordan's leadership had proven itself. Montgomery Enterprises was on a clear upward trajectory, its profits soaring and its influence expanding. Jordan knew that while he had won the battle, there was still much work to be done. The company was thriving under his leadership, but the world outside was still not ready to embrace someone like him. He had to keep pushing, keep proving that he was the right man for the job. Emily, however, remained distant. Her decision to distance herself from him was one that weighed heavily on his heart. But Jordan had a mission now, a goal that transcended everything else. He had to secure his place not just in Montgomery Enterprises, but in the world that had always looked down on him. In the months following the takeover, Jordan's network began to expand. One unexpected ally appeared in the form of Catherine's assistant, a young woman named Sarah who had worked under Catherine for years. Sarah had always seen the flaws in the way Richard and Catherine ran the company. She recognized that Jordan's leadership was exactly what Montgomery Enterprises needed. Sarah approached Jordan one day after a board meeting. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice quiet but determined. "I've been with the company for a long time, and I can see what you're trying to do. I want to help you." Jordan was taken aback. "You want to help me?" he asked, unsure of her motives. "Yes," Sarah said. "I believe in your vision. I can help you strengthen your position within the company. There are people who still want to see you fail, but they don't have the full picture yet." Jordan saw an opportunity. Sarah's insider knowledge could be the key to defeating any remaining resistance, especially those loyal to Richard and Catherine. He welcomed her offer, knowing that together, they could reshape the company from the inside out. With Sarah's help, Jordan's influence within Montgomery Enterprises solidified. He made strategic hires, strengthening the leadership team and diversifying the company's portfolio even further. But despite the growth, there were still moments of tension. The corporate world wasn't ready to embrace Jordan completely. Prejudices, both subtle and overt, lingered in the shadows. During a critical negotiation with a major partner, one of the senior executives, who had been a staunch supporter of Richard, openly questioned Jordan's qualifications. "You're asking us to trust you?" The executive sneered. "But you've had no experience leading a company of this magnitude. Do you really think you can handle this?" Jordan's temper flared, but he kept his composure. "I didn't come here to play it safe," he said calmly. "I came here to make this company stronger. And if you can't see that, maybe you're the one who's out of touch." The room fell silent. The executive's words hung in the air, but Jordan's confidence had shifted the balance of power. The deal went through, and Montgomery Enterprises continued its growth. With each victory, Jordan's power grew, but the road ahead was far from smooth. One evening, after a particularly successful board meeting, Jordan was met by Emily, her first visit to his office in months. She had come to see him, but it wasn't for a reunion. It was for closure. "Jordan, I've been watching everything unfold," Emily began, her voice heavy with emotion. "And I have to admit, I underestimated you, but I've also realized something important." Jordan was quiet, waiting for her to continue. "I love you, Jordan, but you're not the same man I fell for. You've changed, and I don't know if I can keep up with who you're becoming." Jordan's heart sank, but he understood. Emily had never asked for this. She had never wanted to be part of the world he was now building. "I understand," Jordan said, his voice filled with both regret and acceptance. "But I have to do this. Emily, I can't turn back now." Emily nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "Maybe one day we'll find our way back to each other. But for now, we need to go our separate ways." As she walked away, Jordan felt the weight of everything he had sacrificed. His relationship with Emily was over, but Montgomery Enterprises was finally his to lead. He had proved his worth, not just to her, but to everyone who had doubted him. Months later, Jordan was faced with his greatest challenge yet. A powerful conglomerate, one that had always been a rival to Montgomery Enterprises, made an aggressive offer to buy the company. The deal was tempting. The money was more than anyone could imagine. And for a moment, even Jordan considered it. But then he remembered everything he had worked for. His legacy, his identity. He had fought too hard to let it all slip away. He couldn't let anyone dictate his future. With his leadership team in place, Jordan pushed back against the offer. He doubled down on his vision, expanding Montgomery Enterprises into new sectors. He went public with a series of bold initiatives that would change the way the world viewed the company. The company grew even stronger, and the conglomerate's offer was swiftly rejected. Montgomery Enterprises was no longer just surviving, it was thriving. Jordan stood on the rooftop of Montgomery Enterprises headquarters, overlooking the city that had once rejected him. He had come full circle. From being a man dismissed by those around him, to becoming the powerful leader of a global empire. Jordan had achieved everything he had set out to do. "You did it," Sarah said, standing beside him. "You've shown them all who you really are." Jordan smiled, but it wasn't just pride he felt. It was the satisfaction of knowing he had overcome every obstacle placed in his path. The racial prejudices, the doubts, the betrayals, they no longer mattered. "This is just the beginning," Jordan said quietly, as he looked out at the horizon. "Now, we build something that lasts." With the rejection of the conglomerate's buyout offer, Montgomery Enterprises entered a new chapter. Jordan's strategic decisions, his bold moves into new markets, and his unwavering resolve to build a company that reflected his own values set him apart as a true visionary leader. But with power came pressure. Jordan had already begun to realize that success in the corporate world was never just about strategy, it was about survival. He had overcome every challenge, but now he was facing a new enemy, the media. Jordan Montgomery, heir or hero, the headline read. A popular financial magazine had published an exposé questioning whether Jordan's meteoric rise was the result of sheer talent or mere inheritance. Is he truly fit to lead? Or has he been propelled to the top on the wings of family fortune? The article stung. Jordan had worked so hard to carve out his own identity. Yet the media reduced him to nothing more than the sum of his family's wealth. His business decisions, his long hours, his personal sacrifices, all of it seemed irrelevant to the world. They only cared about whether or not he deserved to be there. Jordan knew he had to act. And quickly. He called an emergency meeting with his closest advisors. "We have to get ahead of this," he said, his voice firm but laced with frustration. "We can't let them define us. We've built this empire from the ground up. And we're going to show the world that it's not about where we come from. It's about what we've accomplished." Jordan's team immediately launched a media campaign, positioning him as more than just an heir, but a leader in his own right. They held press conferences, offered exclusive interviews, and emphasized the bold decisions Jordan had made that were changing the landscape of their industry. "We're not a family business anymore," Jordan declared in one of the interviews. "We're a global force. We're a team of innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders. And I'm not just here because of my last name. I'm here because I've earned it." The media, once critical, began to shift their tone. Jordan's confidence and commitment to the company were undeniable. The public started to see him for who he truly was, not a man riding on the coattails of his family, but a man who was reshaping the future of Montgomery Enterprises. While the company soared, Jordan's personal life remained in turmoil. The distance between him and Emily had only grown. She had left the city for a while, seeking solace and perspective, but now, with Jordan at the pinnacle of his success, she couldn't avoid confronting the truth any longer. One evening, after months of silence, Emily returned to New York. She reached out to Jordan, and they met at their old cafe. "I've watched you change, Jordan," Emily said softly, looking out the window. "You've become someone I don't recognize. You're not the man I fell in love with." Jordan had heard the pain in her voice before, but now it was clearer than ever. The woman he once shared everything with was no longer in his life. And now, even though they were sitting together, the connection they once had seemed distant. "I never wanted to change, Emily," Jordan said quietly, his tone full of regret. "But I had to. The world doesn't let you stay the same when you're constantly being challenged. Constantly underestimated." Emily paused, then looked him in the eye. "Maybe that's the problem, Jordan. You've let everything change you. You've let power take over. I don't know if I can be a part of that anymore." The conversation marked the end of their relationship. Emily walked away that night, leaving Jordan to reflect on the consequences of his rise to power. The company had grown, but his personal life had fallen apart. As Montgomery Enterprises grew in power, Jordan's enemies remained in the shadows. Richard, although publicly defeated, was not ready to give up. He began gathering support from disgruntled board members who still saw Jordan as an outsider. They whispered about his lack of experience, his rise to power, and how he was reshaping the company with too much force. One day, Richard made his move. He approached the board and tried to sway them against Jordan, accusing him of being reckless and threatening to destabilize the very foundation of Montgomery Enterprises. "We've let him have his way for too long," Richard argued. "This isn't about legacy anymore. This is about corporate survival. If we continue down this path, we will lose everything we've worked for." But the tide had turned. The board was loyal to Jordan now, having seen the success and growth he had brought. Richard's attempts to reclaim control were unsuccessful, but it was a wake-up call for Jordan. He couldn't trust anyone completely, even those who had once been close allies. Jordan had made it this far on his own terms, but the time had come for him to make a final decision. Would he continue down the path of corporate domination? Or would he take Montgomery Enterprises in a new direction? One that honored the legacy of the past but focused on building a better future? He knew what needed to be done. "We are no longer just a business," Jordan declared in his final address to the company. "We are a movement, and our mission is to create a company that not only thrives but gives back, to empower communities, to create opportunities, and to stand for something bigger than just profits." With his vision now set, Jordan fully embraced his role as the leader of Montgomery Enterprises. He began to reshape the company, not just through acquisitions and profit-driven strategies, but through a renewed focus on social responsibility and inclusivity. He implemented programs to support underserved communities and brought in diverse leadership teams to reflect the world he was building. The company's success skyrocketed, but more importantly, Jordan's legacy was now about more than just business. He had overcome the odds, racial discrimination, family betrayal, and personal loss, and built something that would stand the test of time. Jordan didn't just prove his worth to his company, to the world, and to the people who doubted him. He proved it to himself. The man he had become was not just a successful CEO, he was a symbol of resilience, strength, and the power of overcoming adversity. As Jordan's influence in Montgomery Enterprises continued to grow, so did the pressures that came with it. He had finally secured his place as the leader of the company. But the world outside was still unforgiving. The media, once skeptical, now saw him as a trailblazer, but the power he wielded made him a target for those who wished to see him fall. It was a bright Monday morning when the call came. A major shareholder, a longtime friend of Richard's, had begun to quietly spread rumors of Jordan's leadership being a result of nothing more than inherited wealth. The whispers had become louder, and some members of the board were now questioning Jordan's ability to lead the company for the long term. "You're still an outsider," Richard said during a tense, private conversation. "No matter how much you've accomplished, you'll never fully belong. The board knows that." Jordan could feel the pressure mounting. Despite his achievements, there were still those who refused to acknowledge his worth. He knew that this was the final battle. He had everything to lose, and everything to prove. With the threat of a corporate rebellion looming, Jordan called an emergency board meeting. The room was filled with tension as he stood before them, every eye in the room fixed on him. "I've given everything to this company," Jordan began, his voice steady. "I've proven that I am not just an heir to a fortune, I am a leader. And Montgomery Enterprises is stronger than it has ever been. But I will not let anyone undermine the work we've done." His words were met with silence. The board was divided, some stood by him, but there were still those who were loyal to Richard. It was clear that the time for diplomacy was over. "You want to question my leadership?" Jordan continued. "You want to question my worth?" He let the silence stretch. "I will not step down. I will not be forced out. Montgomery Enterprises belongs to the future, and I am its future." The decision was made that day. Jordan had solidified his place as the leader of Montgomery Enterprises. But the cost was high. The political landscape within the company had been irrevocably altered. Richard's influence was almost gone, but his bitterness remained. In the wake of the board meeting, Jordan felt a bittersweet victory. He had won the battle for control. But at what cost? His relationships, his personal connections, were fractured beyond repair. The rift with Emily had only deepened. She had reached out to him, as she had done countless times, but the distance between them seemed insurmountable. Jordan had become a man who was too focused on the empire he was building to notice the collapse of the personal relationships that had once meant everything to him. One evening, as he sat alone in his office, reflecting on the immense weight of the responsibility he carried, he received a letter. It was from Emily, and it contained words that hit him harder than any corporate confrontation. "I thought you were the man I knew, but I don't know you anymore. I can't be with someone who's lost himself to power. I'll always care about you, but I have to let you go. I hope one day you'll find yourself again." Jordan sat in silence, the weight of her words sinking deep into his chest. He had built an empire, but he had lost the one person who had ever truly understood him. The price of power was becoming clearer than ever. But despite the personal losses, Jordan remained undeterred. He knew that Montgomery Enterprises was bigger than any one individual, and he could not afford to let his personal life get in the way of his mission. The company needed him now more than ever, and he was determined to steer it into an even brighter future. Over the next few months, Jordan worked tirelessly to expand the company's reach even further. He introduced bold new initiatives, shifting the company's focus from corporate dominance to social responsibility. Montgomery Enterprises began investing heavily in underrepresented communities, funding education programs and technology hubs for young entrepreneurs. Jordan's leadership began to be recognized on a global scale. He had become a symbol of resilience, a man who had come from nothing and built something that would last for generations. But still, the media and corporate world remained skeptical. They had seen many CEOs rise and fall, but Jordan had shown a level of commitment that few could match. In his ongoing battle against the forces that tried to tear him down, Jordan found an unexpected ally. Sarah, the assistant to Catherine, had continued to support Jordan from behind the scenes. She had quietly worked to neutralize the influence of Richard and other dissenting voices. Her loyalty to Jordan had proven invaluable, and she became a trusted advisor. "You can't keep going on like this," Sarah said one day, as she sat with Jordan in his office. "You're building something incredible here, but you're letting the past hold you back." Jordan looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. The ghosts of his past, his upbringing, his strained relationship with Emily, the racism he had faced, were still haunting him. It was time to let go, to finally move forward. "I know what I have to do," Jordan said, standing up, "but it's not just about the company anymore. It's about who I've become, and who I still need to be." With Sarah by his side, Jordan made the decision to take Montgomery Enterprises in a new direction. He announced a groundbreaking partnership with multiple global NGOs and philanthropists, aiming to tackle some of the world's most pressing issues: poverty, education, and access to technology. It was a bold move, one that shocked the business world. Jordan was no longer just a businessman, he was a changemaker, using his wealth and influence to drive real, positive change in the world. The partnership not only solidified Montgomery Enterprises' place in history but also positioned Jordan as a global leader in the fight for social equality. "This is what it's all about," Jordan said in a public address. "Building a future that we can all be proud of. A future where success isn't measured by the money we make, but by the lives we impact." As Montgomery Enterprises continued its global expansion, Jordan's success story became the stuff of legends. He had fought for everything he had, facing every challenge head-on. But there was one final hurdle he had to overcome. Richard, still bitter and resentful, came to Jordan one last time. He had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. "You may have won, Jordan," he said, his voice filled with venom, "but you'll never have the respect of this company. You're nothing but a product of your family's legacy. You'll never be one of us." Jordan stood up slowly, his face calm but resolute. "I never asked to be part of your world, Richard," he said. "I've created my own. You couldn't see it before. But now, you have no choice but to respect me." For the first time, Richard's arrogance faltered. He realized that his position was no longer guaranteed, and that Jordan's leadership had become the true driving force behind Montgomery Enterprises. The old world was crumbling, and the new one had arrived. Jordan had won the corporate battle, but the personal losses still weighed heavily on him. His relationship with Emily had ended, and he knew there was no going back. He had focused so much on building Montgomery Enterprises that he had forgotten the very thing that had once driven him: love, connection, and a sense of belonging. But now, with the company secure, Jordan knew it was time to let go of the past. He had built something bigger than himself, something that would outlast him. The company had become a symbol of overcoming adversity, and its success wasn't just about profit, it was about changing the world. "I don't need to prove myself anymore," Jordan thought, standing at the top of the Montgomery Enterprises building, looking out at the city below. "I've built my legacy. Now it's time to build something that lasts." Jordan's next move wasn't about furthering his business empire. It was about making a difference in the world. He redirected his focus to philanthropy, pouring resources into initiatives that supported education, equality, and technological advancement for underprivileged communities. Montgomery Enterprises became a global leader not only in business but in social change. Through its outreach programs, it provided scholarships for students from low-income backgrounds, created job opportunities for marginalized groups, and supported grassroots movements advocating for racial equality and social justice. The real work begins now. Jordan said at the launch of the Montgomery Foundation, "We have the power to change lives. And we're going to use that power to make the world a better place." His legacy had shifted, from a businessman to a philanthropist, a leader who used his influence and wealth for the greater good. Just when Jordan thought he had achieved everything he set out to do, a new challenge presented itself. The Montgomery Foundation was up for a prestigious international award for its contributions to global education and equality. During the award ceremony, Jordan was asked to deliver a final speech. Standing on stage, Jordan looked out at the faces of the world's most influential figures, leaders, philanthropists, and activists who had dedicated their lives to causes much greater than business. But as he spoke, something unexpected happened. "I didn't get here alone," he said. "The road was never easy. But what made this journey worthwhile wasn't just the success. It was the people I met along the way, the communities I was able to support, and the change we were able to create together." His words resonated deeply with the audience. For the first time, Jordan wasn't just speaking as a CEO or a businessman. He was speaking as a man who had lived through adversity and emerged stronger for it. As the awards ceremony concluded, Montgomery Enterprises was named the winner of the prestigious award. But Jordan knew the real victory wasn't in the recognition, it was in the lives he had touched, the people he had uplifted, and the legacy of change that would continue long after he was gone. Jordan Montgomery's name became synonymous with resilience, vision, and social impact. His story, of a man who had risen from the shadows of discrimination, had battled for his place in the world, and had used his success to create positive change, was shared across the globe. He had become a living example of what it meant to overcome every obstacle, to push past the limitations others had placed on him, and to build something that mattered. As he stood in front of the Montgomery Foundation headquarters, looking at the young faces of the next generation, Jordan finally understood what it truly meant to leave a legacy. It wasn't just about wealth or power, it was about the lasting impact he had on the world, and the generations that would continue his work. "This is just the beginning," Jordan thought, smiling as he looked out over the horizon. "And together, we'll change the world."